Most of the time when you go to New York City, you see everything from street level.
But when we went up the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere and saw the city from above.
Hello, welcome to Around the World with Joshua and Alyssa, and we are headed back to New York City once again to show you some of our favorite things there. We saw and experienced too much to show you all of it, so we are just going to stick to some of our top things. And one of those is what we're going to look at today, literally the top of the world on the Western Hemisphere. So we are going to show you the One World Trade Center in New York City. Now, when you look at the New York City skyline, which is one of the most recognizable skylines in the world, you can see it right there above Alyssa's head. Mm-hmm. And two really nice people. Aww. You won't always see them there, but once in a while maybe. And that tallest tower there on the top left-hand side is the One World Trade Center. Also known as the Freedom Tower. It was built after the Twin Towers collapsed. And on the one hand, it replaces those office buildings. On the other hand, it is kind of like a symbol of American freedom and unity and how you can't keep America down, basically. And so here is a view of the Freedom Tower from the 9/11 Memorial. This is the base of one of the Twin Towers. And so it is just to the north of where the towers once stood. So we went to the top of this tower. There are 3 levels of observatories at the tops to look out over the city. And when you first enter at the base, actually it's kind of like in the basement of the tower. Once you walk in, you first have to take escalators down to the bottom, and then you get in elevators that take you to the top. And after you get through security, you are welcomed by this sign that says, "Welcome to the top of the world." And then you take elevators that have video screens on the inside. So as you're going up, you're kind of seeing all these different sights and sounds from the city itself, and like some old historical pictures and things. And then you get to the top, and they have another video up there that you get to watch that gives you some more history of the city and how we eventually got to the One World Trade Tower. So last week we showed you the Statue of Liberty up close and also from inside. This is a view of the Statue of Liberty and Liberty Island from the tower. Mm-hmm. And now we're just going to show you a few pictures from above that we took. And so this is looking out, I believe this was like south. No. This was north. This was north and east. And I think this was straight north. There is the Empire State Building right in the middle. Also a famous New York Tower. And the Brooklyn Bridge is here. And this is off to the eastern side. And then we go and look a little south and east, and our hotel was actually one of those buildings in there. And you can see down below, like in the middle and slightly to the left, there's that big Oculus building that we showed you a few weeks ago with the weird shaped subway station.
And there's the square to the right of that, and there's 2 of them. You can kind of see the bottom corner of the other one at the bottom of the screen, but those are to represent where the Twin Towers once stood. Mm-hmm. And they light up at night like that. Yep.
Those are actually it is the foundations of the original buildings, and then they built the memorial on top of those foundations. So yeah, that's where those Twin Towers were. And this is the same spot, obviously, and you can see that down below. But off on the right side, you can see 2 lights shining up into the sky, and those are there on September 11th every year to signify the towers.
To help people remember, like, this was part of the Skyline and it's not there anymore, but we still remember all that went on.
So if you can see the skyline from the New Jersey side, then you really get a nice view with those two lights going up into the sky. We only saw it from this side up close. But this is what the city looks like from up above. It's really neat. It costs a little bit of money, like $50 a person. It's cheaper if you go on Groupon to get your tickets, so I would highly encourage you to go there, get the exact same tickets, and don't go to the official website because it'll cost you a little more and they'll add on taxes and things. But it was worth it.
It was a very cool view.
So I would pay the money again to go up and see it again. And we also went up at sunset, which is a much better view. Beautiful colors in the sky too, which you go any other time of the day and you're not really going to see that.
Yeah.
So
You're really bright. Okay. I have some more missionary story today.
okay.
And our story kind of goes back a little bit in the pictures, so I'll see if I can keep them all straight because it gets a little confusing. Let's see. We left off last time with John doing ministry in one part of China and Betty doing ministry in a different part of China, and they're waiting for John to finish his first year in China before they could get married. So our story starts off today with Betty riding on a boat. And she's riding on the boat down the river, and it's pouring rain outside. But she said, you know what, God? Thank you that it's raining, because that's keeping all the bandits inside like it's keeping us inside. So they're not out to try to get people or take things away from us, and I'm really glad it's raining. So their little boat was going down the river, and Betty was trying to move around a little bit but not bump the little boy who was sleeping. And he was sleeping because he was coming with her, so she could take him to his school. And she thought about how exciting it was for her and for her sister when they got ready to go to school for the first time, and how she remembered thinking how great it would be to travel and to go all over the world, and how this time she was making a really special trip. She was going to go to the city where her parents lived, and that's where she was going to marry John in just a few weeks. So as she was thinking about it, so many memories kept coming back to her. Memories of when they were at Moody and they spent that time together before she graduated, and they talked about wanting to get married but deciding that instead they wanted to follow what they felt like God's plan for their lives were, and that was for Betty to go to China and for John to finish school. And then how it was amazing how God brought them together, and how Betty and John got to see each other a couple years later in Shanghai, not even something they had planned, and how God had worked it out, and how very soon they were going to finally be able to get married. So Betty went to the village where her family was. Way back from the beginning of the story, they still lived there. I don't think we ever mentioned that again. So they still stayed in that same city and ministered to the people of China, and Betty got to live with them for like a month and a half as she got ready for the wedding. And the morning of the wedding, she woke up and she looked outside, and it was a beautiful day. And she thanked God once again. Thank you for giving us such a great day. We'll be able to have our ceremony outside. And it was in October, just like we're in October now. And they were able to get lots of plants together and flowers. And they just decorated this outdoor space to make it just beautiful and perfect for their wedding. And Betty was so thankful because both her roommate from school, Marguerite, and her friend Katie were both part of her wedding. They were both missionaries in China. And Betty loved how God was using her friends in the same way. So they got to be part of her wedding. And she got to marry John that day. And it was really exciting for both of them and for a lot of the missionaries and Chinese people that got to come to the wedding and see what it was like to have a wedding that was all focused on who God is and wanting to do ministry and life together. So after they had their honeymoon, John and Betty went to a village where they were going to keep learning the language, because both of them had studied Chinese, but now they were going to work on it again together. It wasn't the same place that John had lived, not the same place Betty had lived. This was a new area. And it got cold again, so they bundled up in all of their nice warm clothes, and they tried to wear the clothes just like the Chinese people would. So it was like a thick quilted dress kind of thing that they would wear, and that would keep them warm during the winter. And as they learned the language, they wanted to take more trips out to like smaller villages to be able to tell those people about God. And so they would walk for many, many miles, and every time they got to a village, they'd kind of spend some time in the village, and the people would notice, wow, these foreigners look just like us. They're dressing just like us, but they always wanted to know where they were from. And that would give them a chance for people to come close enough and be able to talk about like some of the tracts that they had. And the tracts were in very colorful papers. And the Chinese people were always very excited to see those colorful papers and learn about them. John always liked to ask people, do you read? Before he handed them the paper. Because people just wanted the paper because it was really pretty, but they didn't necessarily know how to read it. So if they answered no, that they couldn't read, then he would take some time to read it with them. But both he and Betty were still a little frustrated. Their Chinese wasn't the best, and they wanted to keep learning so that they could share everything they knew and answer the people's questions. And they spent a lot of time praying with the people too, making sure that, or praying for these people that they were meeting up with. Eventually, John and Betty got to a village where there were some missionaries that they knew, and they spent like a week doing some different mission work. And John and the missionary would go around and hang up signs in the village, and then they would spend time talking to the men. And at this time in China, the men and the women were very separated. So Betty would spend time with the women, John would spend time with the men, and Betty also loved teaching Bible stories to children. So when the women would gather, they'd usually stay really close, but Betty kept noticing that there were kids on the outside. So she'd try to sneak to the back by the kids, and then she would just sit down and tell them Bible story after Bible story after Bible story. They did lots and lots of Bible stories. Well, after they did this little trip, they went back to their village and they got focused again on learning the Chinese language so they had more words to use for the next time they would go out. And they began praying too that God would have a special place for them to have as their mission. So not just the city where they were being trained, but they wanted to go out into one of these smaller villages and have it as their mission and then be able to go to smaller villages outside of it. So they began praying about it, and an opportunity came for them to go to another village, to the village of, I think it was Qingdai. So it was about 60 miles away from where they were studying, and so they did a lot of walking, and sometimes Betty would travel in like this little carriage thing that some men would carry for them as they went, and John would walk along in the back, and then somebody else would help carry some of their belongings. But when they traveled this way, they had to stop every once in a while for the carriers to take a little rest. But every time they stopped, it gave John and Betty a chance to talk to the people of the area and to share the good news of the gospel. So they loved that all the time. And they got to go through so many beautiful views in the mountains, and they saw the rice fields on each of the hills and how pretty they looked. And they were excited to see more and more Chinese people and to be able to talk to these people. So they finally got to their new village, to the village of Qingdai, and they met up with some missionaries who were there. And the missionaries explained their ministry and showed them around the town a little bit. And just like they had done in the other village, they went around and hung up gospel posters, and it would kind of draw a crowd. People would want to see, like, what's on this poster, or what are these people doing? And it gave the missionary and John a chance to tell the gospel to these people, because they'd gather around. And sometimes they'd stay for a long time, and sometimes they'd lose interest after a little bit. But every little bit of somebody getting to hear the good news of the gospel was a really good thing. Now, since John and Betty had come to be with these missionaries, they were helping these missionaries be able to do more services and more like special meetings. So they had sent word to the people in the outer villages that they could come into their village to hear more about God. So Christians from other villages began to come in, and more of them. And that was so encouraging for Betty to see. Here were all these Chinese Christians who were living in small villages, and they were having to walk a long way to come to this village of Qingdai. And they wanted to hear and learn more about God's word. So John spoke to the men, and Betty and the missionary's wife got to speak to the ladies. And they really, really loved this village so much, and they loved their time with the missionaries. And they made the trip all the way back to their village, back to their schooling. And they learned a lot of new words while they were at this village. And so they began to use those words in their everyday conversation, and then just keep adding more words to their Chinese. And they thought, maybe this is going to be where our mission will be. Maybe we will get to go and be part of this mission and just maybe another year or so. But for now, they ended up staying in the mission base where they were learning Chinese because Betty was going to have their first baby in September. So they stayed close by the mission base, and John got a job kind of working as a secretary there until their first baby arrived. And her name was Helen Priscilla, and she was born on September 11th, 1934. And Betty said, "Don't you think she's really cute? I think she looks just like you." John said, "Well, I don't know. How can you really tell that from a baby? She is really cute, but not when she cries," which is kind of typical of most babies. But he said, "I'm really glad that your mother's coming to stay with you so I can go to Qingdai for a little bit and spend some time with the missionaries, because that is going to be our new base." And by this time, the mission had decided to send John and Betty to this village because the current missionaries were going to go to the United States to kind of like raise more money and go on their furlough time. So John and Betty were going to get to go there to Qingdai, and they were very, very excited about it. So John left Betty in that area, and her mom came to stay with her, and he went out to go talk to different people as he made that long trip, those 60 miles up to the village, and to give money to people because their food had been running out because there had been a drought during the year and they didn't have enough for everything. And so John was kind of helping to provide for the people that way and holding more and more meetings with the people. Now, when he got to the village and after he had done some like surveying and finding a place for them to live and talking with the people of the area and getting really excited about being there, he thought, now it's really important that before I come here with my family, that we make sure that it's a safe place, because the communist soldiers were definitely a very big part of China. Like, they had caused a lot of problems. Remember way back at the beginning of the story, we talked about how Betty's parents were a little bit nervous about going to China because there had been all of these problems before, but mostly it had been calm, but there were still communist soldiers who caused a lot of trouble for people in China, and they were not kind to missionaries or to people who said they were Christians or believed in the Bible. So John went to the magistrate, or like the person in charge of the village, and he asked, "Are there any soldiers around? Do we know if it's going to be a safe place to be?" And the man said, "There are no soldiers here, no communists here, and we want you to come here and live with us. And if there are any bad soldiers coming by, then you just come and you stay with me and you will be safe here." So John just felt like this is going to be a peaceful place, and he thanked God. "Thank you, God, that you picked just the right place for us to be, and I'll trust you to keep us safe and provide for our needs." And you're going to have to come back next time to hear about their move to Qingdai and how God uses them in that city.
All right. Well, now we have another missionary story, kind of, to tell you. Yeah, these people were to a lot of places. They were also serving God separately in different ministries before God brought them together. And their names are Jim and Becky Story.
Oh, that's kind of fun.
Told you it's another story. Anyway, as you can see, they've been in a lot of places. Jamaica, Scotland, Canada, and the USA. And, let's just get right into it. So here they are. That is Jim and Becky Story. And Jim had been a pastor in the States for over 10 years when the Lord led him into missions. There was a day when he felt impressed by the Lord to pray for Jamaica. So he did. And the next day he felt that same impression, so he prayed for Jamaica again. And on the third day, same thing. So after praying, he called Baptist Mid-Missions and asked if there were any special needs in Jamaica, because he didn't know, why does God want me to keep praying for them? Well, the person told him the greatest need was for more missionaries. And so after praying about that need for a while, Jim and his family agreed that they felt the Lord wanted them to go to Jamaica. So in Jamaica, Jim became the administrator of Fairview Baptist Bible College and also preached in churches all across the island. Now, he was already married at that time, so they brought their family there. And after their first term on the field, Jim's wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer and passed away 4 months later.
Oh, wow.
So Jim returned to Jamaica a few months after that, and about a year later, a friend of his asked if he was ready to consider finding a new life partner. He told Jim about a single lady who was a missionary in Scotland, and that lady's name was Becky, and that is who he is married to today. Becky Hales. She was a missionary to Scotland, and she had been a missionary in Troon, Scotland, in a church planting ministry for over 8 years when the Lord led the two of them together.
Oh, that's a really cute story.
They were married in December 1994, and after that they went to Jamaica and continued working at the Bible College in Jamaica. So here's another picture of Becky when she was working in Scotland and leading a children's choir. And here a picture of her with a couple really good friends that she had from there. So as I mentioned, they went back to Jamaica, and eventually, because of a skin condition that Jim had, they had to leave the tropics. They just couldn't keep serving there anymore. So where do you think they went?
Scotland?
Yep.
Aw.
The missionary in Scotland, who Becky had worked with, called them and asked if they would come to Troon, Scotland, and take the responsibility of the church there so he could go to a church on the other side of the island. So that is what they did. And they served in Scotland in church planting for 6 years. And during that time, Becky became ill. So due to her health issues, they needed to change ministries again. And that would allow them to keep working and for her health to recover. So next they went to Canada. And in Canada, Jim became the administrator and a professor at a new Bible college called Emmanuel Baptist Bible Institute. And after a few years, Becky was also able to teach a couple of classes there. So it's interesting to see how God just keeps using their experiences in life and ministry in one place to prepare them for the next place and the next place. They served at Emmanuel Baptist Bible Institute for 7 years. This is the building where the college met. These are a few of their college kids that they worked with. Here's one of the classes with students. And I believe this was one of their services there in the church. After those 7 years, they came back to the U.S. for a furlough. And after their furlough, they started a new ministry called Church Rescue. And they spent 6.5 years helping churches in the U.S. that were struggling. They helped churches in Texas, Pennsylvania, California, Indiana, North Carolina, and Missouri. That's all over the whole country.
Wow.
From California to Pennsylvania and all the way south as Texas.
Yeah.
And north in Indiana. Wow. So this is one of the churches that they helped with in Missouri. And here's a picture of them at a Valentine's banquet. And when they first started this ministry here in the U.S., they lived in an RV.
Oh.
And after a few years of that, they then moved to Missionary Acres. And this is their home there where they retired. They decided in 2016 that whenever they retired, they would do it at Missionary Acres. So when they came to Missouri to help a church there, they were able to move into their retirement home since the church was only 20 miles from Missionary Acres. And they officially retired in March of 2020, last year. Here's a picture of one of the churches that they helped with, and here's one of the services. Just a few different things about all the places they lived. They said that the culture in Scotland is British because it's part of the United Kingdom. Jamaica is in the Caribbean, and so the language and culture is mostly a mixture of British and African, which I think we covered that when we looked at another missionary to Jamaica. Yep. And Canada's culture is a mixture of British and French. So it sounds like all these places where they served were somehow influenced by the British. What was a unique food that they really liked? In Scotland, they have a meal called mince and tatties, which was their favorite. Mince is hamburger and tatties are potatoes. You cook the hamburger with onions and carrots and then add brown gravy mix. This is served with peas and boiled potatoes. In Jamaica, they have a seasoning called jerk, made with allspice, thyme, nutmeg, onion, scotch, bonnet peppers, and a little brown sugar. They really liked jerk chicken.
Oh yeah, we had that in Guam.
Yep. I've had some jerk things before, and
it's really tasty.
I agree. It's super good. The church in Scotland where they worked is still meeting, but only a few people attend right now. The churches in Jamaica are doing well. And the church in Canada, where the Bible college was located, is also doing well. They are now retired and dealing with some health challenges, but thankful that the Lord gives them opportunities to serve Him still. And so you can pray for them as they finish, or as they are now retired and living at down in Missouri, that they would be able to keep serving despite whatever health issues may arrive. As we saw earlier, that caused them to have to change mission fields a couple times. So pray that God would keep blessing them with strength and energy to do whatever He wants them to do in their local church and to keep meeting spiritual needs of people like they have been doing for many years.
It's really cool to hear like real life missionary stories. Like I know these are real life stories, but these are like old ones, and these are like
people that are alive still. Like the ones you're doing are mostly people that are no longer around. But
yeah, that's kind of cool. Thanks so much for watching. Maybe you found our hidden object. It's kind of really hidden today, but hopefully you found it. And come back next week for the last part of our missionary story and a little summary of our different missionaries we've talked about, and one more thing about New York.
Yep, we'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.